This next story has been suppressed by mainstream media. Let's go to Andreas for more.
Everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hello. Welcome to the Exatos. Tune in for another exciting episode of wonder, imagination, and discovery.
Recent Tartarians.
Методами образует всеобщие закономерности, определяющие законы классической физики для нашего
Sometimes I
мира.
look at the moon and just think, the skin's beautiful. Baby, when I met you, there was peace unknown.
Что касается энергии нанами, то она превышает ядерную в немыслимое число раз – 10 в 74 степени.
That's it. That's it. That's it. With your arms now. That's it. That's it.
Thank you for watching Exatos. Keep listening. Remember, if you enjoyed the video, please follow and subscribe and share and support. It really helps. Coming up next, Exatos.
By the way, that's gone. If you didn't record that, that's gone forever. It's gone.
Well, he can handle his sword. Let's see him run the backstage administration of a podcast stream. It's Chris Terrorist. What's up, bro? Good to see you.
What's up? Glad to be here.
How you doing, Raph?
Yo, welcome everyone. I thought I'd gonna burn some Palo Santo, which some say is highly unsustainable to do if you're in Europe, but I'll do it anyways. And yeah, with that intro, anytime I listen to it, I'm like, I have to check. Do I have to stream open another tab? Like it sounds as if it's like doubling or something, but oh no, it's just a regular Exertus intro.
Idiosyncratic, it's true. And while you have your thing, I've got my little, wind, air, portable air conditioning, so I can feel cool, literally.
Oh, you literally have an air. Wow, I never saw something like that. Amazing.
I
All
did
right.
when I
Well,
was
nice.
little.
Why not?
As a kid, there was like Sharper Image, and Sharper Image was this thing that was like the commodification future. They're like, in the future, you'll have Razor scooters, and it'll be great. But yeah, if you want to go to the first tab, Chris.
Oh, yeah. Here you go.
Happy September 11th, everybody.
Oh yeah, happy September 11th. So for today, there's only very few links. I actually had planned not to even have a list at all, but then I was like, okay, the few maybe interesting things I'll pull up, especially due to the synchronicity today of Andreas picking this thumbnail. And I just want to say, I mean, I'd love to know how it is for you, or even how would you say, is it for maybe a liberal American? How likely would they be to stick up their flag in their garden, or let's say regularly use their flag on a podcast they're doing? For Austrians, I can tell you, either you're want to signal, let's say you're especially patriotic, or if not, you would definitely be framed as most likely doing some kind of a right-wing podcast, if you would even have that in your thumbnail, unless you only use it as like a symbolic reference because you want to discuss some, I don't know, official mainstream history of Austria or something like that. So how would you say is the relationship to your own flag within your own country, even within, let's say, quote unquote, left-wing individuals? I'd be curious because I visited, but I didn't, let's say, really check for that. Or maybe I didn't meet the right people that were too gung-ho about nationalism or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like, this is a little tight. Yeah, I feel like we have nationalists. So if you go to the Midwest especially, you'll see a lot of American flags. And if you get away from the coast, you'll see a lot of American flags. There are definitely patriotic people. Like you go to New York and New Jersey and born in the USA, play. What do you think, Chris? What do you think about the flag, the US flag? Is it a sign of like super right wing here, the same as in Europe? Or is it less.
It wouldn't have to be, but I'm just saying that's how it's being framed. Or then, of course, people adapt and are like, "Oh,
I would agree. I would
better
say
not
in
use my
Europe,
own flag." As a, even just I
yeah.
do a podcast from Austria. Unless you maybe do it very cultural specific or something, you would rather refrain from using the Austrian flag. Maybe even more so with the coat of arms
Right.
on it.
No, if you wanted to be like chill, you would use like the European Union Austrian license plate or something like that. Like you could, if I did this, this would have been a symbol, a nod that I was cool with the establishment. That I'm like, yeah, we have an Austrian perspective on this as a state in the European Union of states, which is more of a collectivist mentality. But if you signal in Europe that you're a statist, it's different than in the United States. I think that's why I'm wondering, Chris, do you think of it as? Because I agree with you, Raph. But do you think the United States, the American flag, is like, has it become only a right-wing symbol almost now?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, with the flag, like as a former scout, and I know you know what I'm talking about as a former scout, I think most people, when they consider the flag, they don't actually understand like the symbology behind it. Like they don't understand what red represents. They don't really think about like what white is supposed to represent. I mean, the stars are obvious, like one for each state. We know that, but there's that level. So it's like, you know, when you think about a person who has a bias towards or against for the flag or, you know, not the like anti-flag or whatever, like the question is, first of all, do they understand the symbology of the flag? Like what each thing about it represents? And second, it's like, it's really more, I guess, your own relationship to your country, right? Has your country treated you like shit? I mean, as a child of immigrants, everyone in my own family seems to be pretty positive towards like, you know, the symbolic meaning of the American flag and all that stuff. As far as, is it conservative? I don't know. You tell me. Cause like if immigrants in my own family appreciate it, you know, what it represents, then I don't think it's strictly like conservative, like, you know, like white American or something like that, you know?
I feel like in California, sometimes it's treated as a conservative call in the same way that in Europe, you know, the Europeans might look at state flags or country flags.
Yes, I just want to say, Chris, please mute yourself when not talking, just because you have a very slight background radiation. I want to
Sorry
say
about that.
Thank you. No, it's fine. Thank you. Something, yes, right. So a recent anecdote, just as we're on this topic, and it's 9/11, which actually, of course, maybe Andreas or anyone can bring it up. I can bring it up. 9/11, 11/9 is this Jesuit ring coding. You know, never forget. Let's say.
Really
but recently
quickly,
about the whole.
Oh yeah, no,
yes.
You do that first. You do that first. Keep going.
No, just about the whole immigration thing. So I have a good friend. She's a singer, amazing singer, and she's black, for lack of a more politically correct term I'd be inclined to use, or has, you know, pretty black skin. I believe she's half African. I should pick the right country now. I believe Senegalese. And now I have to imagine, because of course you had the recent. Oh, nice. What was that one? That was a nice one. The previous one. Wow.
It's a vibe.
Wow. That's a good one. So anyhow, then you have to imagine her, you know, beautiful woman, black skin, in the neighborhood, and some random Austrian lady comes to her and is like sitting down to her, and she's like, well, what do you say about it? About all these immigrants, yeah? Or like all these outsiders, yeah? And then she's like looking at her, and she's like kind of like, you know, she's, you know, very open and liberal in that sense, you know, which is a good, you know, general attitude, obviously. She's like, well, you know, I don't see that. I don't know what you mean. And by the ways, I mean, look at me. What am I supposed to say about it? Yeah. But I found it also interesting because this shows in a very specific way also how, even with the whole immigration topic, you have, of course, the whole workforce issue. You have the legal versus illegal immigration, all kinds of potential trafficking and drugs and God knows what. But still, it's interesting that even in this particular example, the native inhabitant, let's say, at least who was, I mean, I guess she was also born here, but the Austrian lady, maybe her parents both were already born here or whatever, but still, she quote unquote correctly identified the more common element, which would in this case be a black lady, but who was born and raised in Austria, as compared to, let's say now, what would be the bad example, you know, the extra immigration from what would be the most recent one? I don't even know which country to pick anymore. Yeah, but whatever would be the newest thing that maybe is the most
Somebody who
culturally
hasn't
remote.
assimilated yet.
Exactly. And yeah, so anyhow, just because you put that flag there was like, this is so funny. Even for me, I wouldn't put it there. But on the meta level, what it actually is more about, maybe especially in Europe as compared to America, because I believe America, mostly the states, I'm not sure how much statism there is there in terms of the real importance of sovereignty on a local level and federalism. In Austria, I would say, although you have the counties, but there you have like, which would be like states in the US, but in Austria, maybe they have like maximum, Vienna is like maximum 2 million. Then you have one more big county with like 1 million or something, and all the
But it
others are
becomes
less than that.
different because it's like once you're European Union, Europe is more a country than the United States is. You've got more trains and connections and less isolationism than we have. And so maybe that will change soon, but for now, Europe has ideologically become more of a country. And the United States
Right.
still
Just
has
so I
this
don't
football team idea. Sorry. go ahead.
just so I don't miss my train of thought. Now I would say in the talks it's even more about let's say even sovereignty in a sense, the national flags, as compared or contrasted with the European Union flag, because to many the European Union flag as the, let's say, most top New World Order cornerstone that is visible to the general public, let's say, and it's officially run like a communist politburo, by the way, the voting and so on. I'm not making this up. These are official procedures, which more look like a communist, how do you call it, like imperial senate type thing after Palpatine took over, than, a supposedly free and open system, transparent or anything like that, or driven by the people, God forbid. Yeah, so now in the discussions, it's more like the national flag maybe be seen as something, we want to keep our sovereignty and so on, even though, of course, also here I would argue or question, only because then it's taken back to the national parliament doesn't necessarily mean either that the real local commoner people have a true influence on it either, right? But that's kind of how the dichotomy or how it's contrasted. The national flags is like a sovereign thing, or actually almost seen as a devolution, representative of a devolution of power, because the European Union, is more like a new idea.
You could
whereas
do it
I
in
guess
France. If you're in France,
seen
you could
differently in
still,
the
because
US.
it could be ideological. So like the French flag, like the United States flag, can be an ideological flag. And a Prussian flag, as opposed to just an Austrian flag, also means something different with the Prussian seal, because it's an
Yeah,
ideological
but we don't have a
perspective.
current Prussian flag.
Exactly.
I mean,
So the Austrian flag is basically the Prussian flag without the shield, without the crest, right? They've removed the crest.
only the old version, not the red, white, red. I'm pretty sure that's because the Prussian flag, I think it's also gold, no? Or it's white? No, it's white and black,
Just white
actually.
and black, yeah.
White and black with the eagle
With the
and
seal. That's the Prussian seal, right? So that is on the Prussian Austrian. Let me look and see. Where do I go to find that? Austrian. There you go.
It reminds me too much of Albania's flag. It's giving malicious vibes.
Well, I mean,
which one? The Austrian flag? This what you just saw?
Yeah, no, I said it reminds me of the Albanian flag, and it was giving me like malicious vibes.
The Austrian flag, this one
Yeah,
that you just seen,
because it's got the double-headed eagle, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but they still have the double-headed, which looks pretty cool, I have to say. Like as a style, it's pretty
that on a
good.
dress, sweet, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, makes you want to be an Albanian nationalist. Too bad.
No, but so if a French person has up a flag, then it's about their French perspective, not so much about French colonialism or French ideology or Macronian racism or ethnocentricity or anything like that. I mean, you can do that, but with the Austrian flag or with something that's, I mean, even the English, maybe even the English flag to an extent, I wonder. But with a sports team, it's different, because with the sports team, you can be pulling up your flag and saying, like, this is our sports team. And Europe's all about that, because now you're engaged on a level horizontal playing field that everyone's agreeing to the rules or, lack thereof of the game. So I think that's also why.
I think there's also something to be said about language and how, like, you know, apparently Austria is like a primarily German-speaking language, correct?
Well,
Turkish.
Austria,
Just kidding.
yeah, well, this is the whole rabbit hole with Old High German and the connections to Old Arabic, but that's more of a historical discussion. In present day, basically, if you learn proper German, which you technically do in school, both in Austria, in Germany, and I believe also, at least in the German-speaking regions of Switzerland, you 95% learn the same German. At least between Germany and Austria, it's really, at least the High German, I believe, is virtually the same, only with some maybe particular expressions in the lexicas or something. And with Swiss German, it may sound a bit different, and they have particular rules and so on, and it may be difficult to understand for me, for example. But I believe many of them also actually learn the standard High German, which would be exactly the same, let's say 95% between Austria, Germany, and Switzerland.
I've always found German to be very interesting because English is a very, you know, it's a very hybrid language because, you know, I know it's not really true, but they say like, oh, you could speak English and using entirely like Germanic root words, root-based words, and and just completely omitting Roman.
You basically
influence words.
can. I think you basically can speak either Latin English or Germanic English. I've done that. I've had a girlfriend. I remember we used to have like really bad communicational differences, and that was
Yeah.
one of the things that I figured out later. I was like, her parents are in a Celtic Gaelic band, and you know they studied German, and all of it is why she says sorry instead of you know, I apologize or whatever it is. Like these little things are completely different, right?
Yeah.
What you're,
Like instead of reading, you'd say book learning or something.
maybe, I don't know. What is the German word for reading?
Lesen
Okay, is that from Latin?
is the
though?
verb.
That's the thing.
Well,
Sometimes
Lego.
there's-
Well, you could
Yeah.
put it from Lego, which is to read, or I read, or whatever.
Yeah.
You would technically make the connection. Yeah, so, I mean that's the whole language
That's the thing. That's
discussion.
interesting that you're using like Latin roots.
But
in your
what did you want to
barbaric
say, terrorist, or what did you want to get at with German?
Oh, no,
Or
I
with
mean,
English?
no, I mean, okay. So what I was saying is when it comes to like the exclusive nature of like a country's culture, like I think language is a big aspect because, you know, if you move to a country and it's one of those countries where there's just a huge language barrier for you, it's like you're not gonna be as likely integrated into it. Besides just like stuff like flags and also historical context of like your place in your country and whatnot.
book learning. Man, you're onto something with that. So it's basically, yeah, it's lecture or lesson, a lesson. That's
Yes,
weird.
I mean this is the question. I had to or wanted to learn English quite early on properly, I guess, and I very soon noticed a lot of similar words between German and English actually. Aside from all the loan words and the words that are imported, or the Anglicisms as they call it, which some like more and some like less. Also, again, could almost make you framed as right wing if you don't want to use all the Anglicisms imported through, you know, American cultural imperialism, together with all the TV shows and Malcolm in the Middle and
Right,
God
like
knows.
we can. It's true. In
Look
America
for
and
the
in British, they
Singer
look at
star.
intellectualism of British English, right, is to use Latin English. If you go to school, they teach you how to use Latin prefix and suffix terminology. And that's what separates you from the layman, like the barber, the barbarian versus the civilized. It's literally Latin. It's crazy.
For sure.
And then also with French, of course, you have many connections, and I, you know, was lucky or not to also learn French. And for me, it was very obvious, at least for these three languages. I mean, I don't want to say they're virtually the same, but you have many words and expressions where you actually then like, oh, it's so similar. Yeah, makes you wonder about it. And I still haven't figured it out. Please go on.
Well, I did want to say something about September 11th. So, Alex Soros said, "Today we remember the lives lost on 9/11 and honor the bravery of the first responders who ran towards danger." And as a New Yorker, Alex is forever in awe of the resilience and spirit of this great city. Never forget. And I'm just like,
And you know what? I'm forever in awe of the insurance payout they apparently made, or not, but
Man, I love being in New York City. I love living in New York City. However, if you're not from New York City, I don't recommend you move here because it's just so hostile, you know, in terms of like just just quality of living. Like you have to really break your back to like live comfortably here. And I mean, even if you were born here, that's not even a guarantee that you're going to have like your foot in the right door. You know, like there's so many pitfalls, and a lot of them are spiritual, I think, you know, considering like one of the biggest things people fall into is addiction and whatnot. Yeah. But the whole 9/11 thing, I mean, that was, it almost passed by too quickly, you know, in memory. Like you would think we would be more hung up over it, but no, like it just kind of passed away, passed out of our collective consciousness, like within a span of few years, you know. I would have thought it would have been a lot worse than, you know, like in retrospect, right?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people also say like not to talk about it, particularly around it. They're like, oh well, I knew people who were firefighters or whatever, so let's not ever talk about like the event. But is this a different thing that you didn't put in the itinerary? Well, I'll allow it.
Yes.
The
Thank you.
the 2020 attack was really atrocious. This is something that was kind of intense, right?
So just because I don't know, something that you said triggered this right now, terrorist, something about, yeah, well, security, 9/11, terrorist attack theme overall. So here,
23, 19, all the numbers. I'm sorry, it's the wrong show for that.
yeah, well, 2nd November 2020, I'm not sure how many codings we have here. What's highly suspicious is that within like half an hour, there were like hundreds of police, like almost, I don't know, halfway militarized or not, because strangely enough, like not even a kilometer apart within the city, they apparently had a training exercise happening just around that time.
Crazy, right?
I mean, anyone who's learned anything, knows that at least that's a cue that something strange is going on. They did some interviews back then, but the main point I want to bring up, just in terms of overall political perception or deception or even disintegration of perceived morality of politicians or the integrity, you have to imagine the individual that was interior minister, which is responsible for the inner security, right, technically, was a guy by the name of Karl Nehammer, who then, I guess within 1 year or two or whatever, when they went through the prime ministers and health ministers during the lockdown period, which was quite extensive in Austria, or the, threatened to give a mandate period and all the other restrictions, this guy, they even then gave out reports that said, yeah, he got informed by some other foreign secret service from Slovenia or something, because these guys were literally like buying rounds and buying weapons, but it didn't really get through. You also have to consider his party basically has been ruling, I believe, almost nonstop for like 30 years, at least as part of the government, and they almost always held the interior ministry. So it was basically almost always them that had control of the secret service. And then, I mean, just imagine what could happen if you have the same power structure and control of such a thing for so many years. And then just what I mean in terms of integrity falling apart, even perceived, is that this guy manages then to become chancellor, whereas usually if something like this happens, what would be a usual political reaction in the US, would you say? Maybe except for as a US president themselves, but what would be an appropriate reaction in your minds? Or maybe even just 20 years ago, an appropriate reaction, let's say. If I am the interior minister and a terrorist attack like this happens under my watch, what's going to happen next?
I mean, at this point, like you can't really unsee what's actually going on, in my opinion, which is like literally orchestrated disasters and not just terrorist attacks. Because like that's what the core of like what you're saying is, like at this point, like these guys are so deeply rooted and they're so like embedded that clearly a lot of this stuff is more than, I don't know if this is controversial to say, but there's a lot of evidence suggesting that this is orchestrated stuff, which kind of like, I don't know. I mean, the broader question is like, why would you kind of let things happen? And also just to kind of give you a suggestion, like maybe it's not just terrorist attacks, as in what if some entity had the ability to generate like an earthquake, or something like as a little more innocuous than like some like religious radicalist or something. I don't know. I mean, maybe that sounds too like rabbit holey, but like if you're suggesting to me that you got these world leaders that have such like auspicious. That's not the right word. Like such weird and like suspicious ties to like each other and events that go on in like a synchronized way. You're like, this is a little fishy.
Auspicious, suspicious, conspicuous, all of it's true.
Yeah, so what I want to get at
They're
basically is
effective.
that within a, maybe just different view of politics or something, or even in my naive view, even of just how it should be perceived, the natural step would be, oh, I'm so sorry, guys, I effed up, I'm stepping down, at least to protect the party. You get some new guy with a white vest or something. All right, you do something. But this guy almost, literally got promoted for that. And he's still theirs all the time since then. And also now, because now what's also
That's the
always
problem.
very
That
suspicious to
happens here
me
too.
is the elections seem so often synchronized between Austria and America, because now we have elections in less than a month. You have elections in 3 months. And the last elections, even in the US, was it 4 years ago or 5 years ago? 4. Okay.
4.
So here it may have been 5. Oh, no, it may also have been 4 because they broke. No, I think they went to the maximum this time because the government was literally the most hated government in all of Europe. So they stuck out until the end and didn't call for early elections. Yeah, anyways, so I just wanted to point out that it's so insane to me how even the perceptions of these individuals, like nobody cares. Like you can literally have your political responsibility, security, you do the most major F up possible, and then you get promoted and you keep talking about the importance of security and all the things you have to do and all the important measures you have to take. Whereas you and your own government, or you were the government for the last 5 years and your own party has co-ruled or major ruled the country for like the past 30 years or however,
Yeah, because you're
practically
elected
ever
by
since the end of the
lobbyists,
war.
not by people. So if lobbyists care about, if you're still effectively working as a lobbyist, it probably isn't such a big deal if you're, the people, your constituency don't favor you, because you can always deal with your constituency.
Say again, if your constituency don't favor you because you have the lobbyists that fund you, or
Yeah,
how do you mean?
because your lobbyists not only fund you, but they control like they've control over a lot of the voters as well, right? Because people work for
Here,
them or purchase through them.
I actually may say a few things anonymized. Recently had a talk with an individual who was, let's say, a little bit closer to these structures. And what they said was quite funny, is in terms of that, yeah, actually, one way of how it works is that you simply have, millionaires, industrials, whatever, and it's not as if they're like hogging over the party or over the party secretariat or something, but if they made a substantial donation or whatever, maybe just once in a few years they give a call and they're only like, oh, well, my dear politician's friend, and by the way, I funded your campaign with 50 million. Haven't you considered about this and this and this, And that's all it takes. And then people believe in elections or whatever. And I mean, you see this in all the movies and so on, in less and more extreme versions. But yeah, it's just kind of hilarious when then, of course, strangely, you get confirmations from people that are closer to this. But then again, where did Hollywood get all these stories? Just like, whether it's the occult stuff for the children or whether it's the James Bond stuff for the adults, it's not really exactly as in the movies, but it's too close to relegate all of that into fantasy like they would want you to do, and to be like, oh yeah, my politician cares about me so much. Yeah, I mean, well, I don't think that you are under this illusion, but please go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the oil or the grease that allows this machine, this mechanism of control to actually function properly is, I mean, maybe this will sound vague, but I think it's very tangible. I think it's fear. If you could create industries, if you could create narratives, if you could create events that generate a lot of fear, and like the more potent forms of fear you lock a person into, the greater degree of control you have over them. So this could play out in all sorts of scales, all sorts of potencies. But yeah, I think that's really what the whole in frontline incentive is when it comes to, like, I guess, like universal control over things, is, especially if you're dealing with people, is you gotta make them afraid. You have to keep people afraid.
I mean,
it's a requisite.
Exactly. And what may have been relevant is, apparently, I didn't even pay attention to that so much, but apparently this happened just hours before another lockdown had been officially instated in Austria. So the lockdown already had been announced. And then synchronistically, we have this attack just before the day of the lockdown, make everyone sure they stay home, or I don't know what. So yeah, we don't have to dwell on this, but I just wanted to bring it up again that, like, it's not even, how should I say, don't even care enough to hold up the pretense, or maybe they really don't have enough personnel, or there's other background connections which make it important you belong to certain groups or made certain oaths in order to access certain positions. But yeah, the whole, I just think it's funny because Austria, of course, in certain ways can be seen as a microcosm, which may reflect some other places as well. Yeah, one other example I can talk about from another individual I spoke to about what happened with the whole thing. I brought this up once, Andreas, with Strache and, let's say, the dismantling or demolition of the last Austrian government. Let's see, or if you basically just put in Ibiza video, I had brought this up before, but maybe we could just briefly look at it. If it's not here in the link list, if you would just go Strache Ibiza video, then you will just find it online anywhere. Or wait, I can send you a link. 1 second.
Doing all those crazy German letters. All right, while you do that, I'm just gonna show these guys. If you remember from The Big Lebowski, he's getting beaten up, and he's gotta his carpet's getting peed on and all that stuff, and he has to write a bad. He wrote a bad check for 69 cents on September 11th. And that was a big part of that movie. Kind of also like in The Matrix, right? Matrix, September 11th is on his passport.
Oh yeah.
Right, his passport expires on September.
Capital
11th.
City, USA. It's not technically New York, but in a way it is.
Well, or capital city could also be Washington, D.C.
Wait, oh damn! They even have 11-9 and then 901.
Yeah.
119901. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's mirrored. Nice. Yeah, so this was the story. So maybe this, or I hope, terrorist and all of you, this will sound very provincial to you because it's Austria. And also in the video that I will bring up next, there is actually a guy who also says this, which I realized like a year or two ago, that many people actually compare Germany as to Austria compared with America as to Canada. I'm not sure how many parallels there are, but at least in terms of overall population size and maybe a few other aspects, there may be some similarities or parallels. Anyways, this is interesting because this was basically a video recorded many years ago where the main, let's say, right-wing politician guy that got more and more popular was caught in Ibiza talking to some basically fake pseudo investors or pseudo millionaires, and was tape recorded, and this was all a setup basically. We also once showed that there is very interesting connections because this operation seemed to have been founded by Omidyar networks. I'll bring it up again, Andreas. Omidyar networks belonging to this one Amazon co-founder who lives on an island and you can only meet in Second Life, as you explained to me, Andreas. And interestingly, this tidbit I'm mentioning now was brought up in exactly, from what I could tell, one conversation on one of the more popular private Austrian channels that's more like a boulevard channel, but they give a little bit more leeway sometimes with the statements, and it was never really ever mentioned anywhere else from what I could tell, especially not in mainstream or anything, or as you would think, like maybe it's relevant, who's apparently funding things that can be used to, at the very least demolish a running government in Austria, which, by the way, at that point, this was the Black Party, who I showed the guide before, who made the security F up, and they were in a coalition with the Blue Party, which is the Freedom right-wing party, where this guy, who you just seen, belonged to. And during that time, they actually ran the Interior Ministry. So they gave up control of it to these, blue right-wing guys. And it may well be possible that they were looking through some documents and found all kinds of irregularities of, 30, 40, 50 years of Secret Service shenanigans. And there had been too many scandals in Austria with too many things I don't even want to mention. So that may be one part. And the other part I heard of was that actually there was a debate around that time in 2019 about having a forced mandate that children could only attend kindergarten if they get administered, I believe, a certain measles vaccine. And from what I know from the background, actually the opinions also within the Freedom, let's say, right-wing party, were divided. But then ultimately, through the influence of some individuals that have some understanding about vaccination, I would say, they made a push and then put it like this and said, all right, the ministry that is responsible for this was run by the Freedom right-wing party. And they then decided internally, all right, we actually don't want to force a mandate, although the party internally was split, but that's the opinion that got through in the end. And they said, all right, but we're going to claim, we're going to, let's say, play a political game and now say, oh, well, you know, technically, if the other party, the Black Party, I mean, it sounds Black Party, right? The People's Party, the Volkspartei, if they overrule it because they're the bigger coalition partner, we can't really do anything about it, right? But that was just a political propaganda ploy because they really didn't want it, but put it like this, like, oh, they can overrule us, to make sure that in the future then, if they would have instated the mandate, they could always have pointed back and said, well, look at this evil Black Party, they overruled us and it's all their fault.
The evil Black Party.
Exactly. But the Black Party themselves, they didn't actually want to take responsibility for it, really. So when that move was being pulled, they themselves pulled back from wanting to instate the mandate, and then the whole thing was gone. But the interesting thing is that 2 weeks after that, apparently, this Ibiza video appeared, and the whole government was demolished. Whereas, again, this government had among the highest approval ratings, even though I don't necessarily trust in rating things, but still, and overall economically, similar maybe in a way like with Trump, yeah? And what came in later, after they got dismantled in very strange and curious ways, was literally the government that has the lowest approval ratings of any government in the European Union, or maybe even worldwide, except for some dictatorships potentially, where you don't have these kind of surveys. So yeah, again, it's just provincial topics, but maybe it kind of shows similar patterns as to what can go on a larger scale. And if this type of effort is being put out for a country where it's only about managing, you know, maybe 10 million individuals or whatever, even though Austria is important for many other reasons, well, what kind of effort, shenanigans, stage work, magician craft would they be willing to apply, wag the dog style, to control potentially 200 to 400 million, as in the US, or 500, or however the influence extends. So just consider that.
Have you ever lived in the States before, or have you been to the States often?
Well, not often, but one time I stayed for about 3 months.
Yeah, where in the States?
That was in about 2015, and I mainly stayed in New Jersey, a little bit in New York City, and then I actually went cross country from Boston, Massachusetts by car on historic Route 66, more like on the southern side, I would say, going through New Mexico, Arizona, St. Louis.
Whoa.
And then going all the way up to California by car. I didn't even drive, but even just sitting in the driver's seat for 7 hours was like, but it was amazing to see, of course.
What was your favorite place that you saw?
So we visited a few friends. There were a few cool places, like one place we could even pull up. It's called Arco Santi. That's like I want to say commune. It's not a commune, but it was built as Arco Santi was built as like a compound to be supposedly self-sufficient. I don't think they ever managed to make it self-sufficient.
In Arizona.
Yeah, but it's like a huge block of concrete built in the 60s, and around you have these farms and stuff. So I definitely enjoyed, let's say, the desert places there. This compound was interesting. Where we also stayed was in Española, New Mexico. There is a Sikh shrine there, or Sikh temple, and that was also very nice. I guess I kind of like this like desert vibe. And then I also stayed in California, more like Southern California, for a week, close, I believe, to Lake Arrowhead, or somewhere in the mountains, like somewhere quite high up, which was nice because it would have been already pretty hot, and there were 10 degrees less, so it was nice, to sleep and everything. And then I stayed for a month in San Francisco, and I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. So,
were you traveling mostly alone, or were you with like people, your friends?
Yeah. So I actually got there through someone I initially met online, which was amazing. And then he was like, "Oh, meet with my friends in New Jersey, and let's go together to California," because he wanted to move his stuff. So we found he found like a service where they said, oh, you can get the car for free, and you just have to deliver it over there. Yeah. So we made things like, and then we started like really cheap Airbnbs where someone just put up a super cheap price as a promotion or for some other reason. And we was looking up while we were traveling, booking those, or we were staying with friends that he knew or that I knew. So that was the first part. And then in San Francisco, I guess I technically stayed alone because a very nice friend was just leaving for a month. He allowed me to stay in his place, which of course is, in San Francisco, you literally can't even afford a room by now. So that was amazing. And there, I guess I just made some new friends, which was very much fun also. When synchronistically you just meet the right people at the right time. And then I went back to New Jersey and to New York and basically revisited the friends which I had initially met arriving through that friend, right? And then I went to New York for a week, meeting even more people. So, when you're traveling, I think this is certainly one thing that McKenna had right in terms of traveling being a psychedelic unto itself. If you're in the proper attitude, that's certainly correct.
Just walking, I'm sure, can also be like psychedelic.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you now that you've been through that whole experience, like going cross country through America, if you could go back and talk to yourself who is just about to go on that same journey, what would you tell that self?
Enjoy the trip.
Yeah. All right.
I don't think
That's valid. That's great.
Yeah. Honestly, because by now I could always say, oh, then there's things you understand a lot more, or you would have wanted to investigate more, or maybe not spend so much time on because of new understandings you have. But then again, understanding I have now was contingent on whatever linear processes, right, that may have happened. So from this perspective now, I don't necessarily think I would, let's say, want to change anything or improve on anything.
There's a weird sexual Reichian metaphor.
Oh, there's only one thing, because I actually went, but this was even years earlier. I went to, but stay up, Andreas, because I actually visited Santa Cruz in like 2011. Yeah. So I would have been like, oh, then I would have wanted to know Andreas is there just to go buy the other house, In 2011, I was in summer.
Yeah,
I was there for a day.
I was living in San Diego and Santa Cruz sometimes, I think. I forget exactly. It's a wild. I was there's a lot going on in 2011.
Did you ever go to that organic supermarket in 2011? They had like a really cool organic supermarket. I don't remember the names.
New Leaf, Herb Room,
okay, there's a few. Okay, it's a Santa. Oh wait, Cafe Gratitude, I think, is something. Wait.
Oh yeah, we'll have to talk about that in a second because Cafe Gratitude has a great cult that was a raw food cult, and
wait, I have another story about this.
Join that cult. It was great.
I have another story about this because apparently, supposedly, when I arrived in San Francisco, I met a girl because she was a friend with someone or something, and she was like, oh, come out, check out this place. And I believe like when I was first there just for a week or whatever in 2011, I once went to a Cafe Gratitude place. It was like, oh, nice food, whatever. I'm not sure if I completely realized the whole raw vegan thing yet, but I guess I was on a track. And then years later, I'm coming there, and this girl is like, oh, come check out this co-working space. And we go there, it's like a huge space and amazing and so on. We chill out. She's strangely enough playing Soul Action music, which is a label I can recommend. And this was exactly the music I was listening to at that point. Of course, hilarious because I literally had the same music open on my phone. And she saw it and was like, oh, you listen to this music? Didn't you hear? That's like the music she's playing in the co-working space all day. And I was like, it's so funny. We had a good time. But main point being that she said this place was a Cafe Gratitude before, and they dismantled it, and it still had the industrial kitchen or something. And there was also like, oh, the circle is closing or whatever. How strange it is that I'm there 2 times. One time I visit a cafe, and the next time I'm like in a place that this was formerly now closed down, turned into this very interesting co-working space. I can hang out there.
And the Max Cafe also was really cool, which became a living space and then was like a women's shelter for a while. I don't know if this is not the right. Okay, because I've got like a thumbnail share instead. Basically, Cafe Gratitude is still a raw food place, but Cafe Gratitude Cult where there's a bunch of people. Is this the article? There was a bunch of people that were like,
Isn't
yeah,
it called? It's just a restaurant.
to work here. They were like forcing people to join this weird cult and talking about sacred commerce and all this other
That's
stuff.
really funny. I actually have a friend who went through that. Like he got a job at working at some fucking some health food place on Harvard campus.
Oh,
And
God.
he told me that when he got the job, like his boss did this weird fucked up ritual where he would drive them out to like the hood or something in Boston,
God.
like, and then he was like they'd take his wallet, take your phone, and then just drop you off and then drive away, and then you make your way back home. And then when you meet up with your boss, he's like, well, now you know what it's like for your employee's first day of work, like, that's training to be a manager or whatever. And I heard this, I was like, what? Like, what? But yeah, apparently they like businesses try to like act like cults nowadays. It's powerful. It's very powerful.
That's how a good business should be. I don't know if you remember though.
Yeah, I'm like, have you never heard of multi-level marketing?
Right.
And their marketing techniques.
This isn't that big of a deal, but in Bill and Ted, there's a scene where they're like, what will, like, if you really are us in the future, like, what number will we be thinking about in the future? And it's 69, and it's kind of about, like, in the future, they're going to be, like, because they're kids, but they're going to be men, right? So there's a little metaphor to there. I like that they did that in Bill and Ted.
But don't these guys also play in something else? Or no, isn't there like a new remake or something?
There's
a recent
3
one?
of them, yeah. It's a couple years ago. It was like during the pandemic that it came out. They couldn't quite finish it. It was kind of terrible in some ways. I mean,
we don't talk about that here.
Kevin Smith liked it and he cried, but like, I don't know. Kevin Smith is like a like perversely well-adjusted person. He's gone like full normal dad mode, and he's gonna like make it. It's hard to come to terms with.
So what we can do?
Yo, Raph, I got a question.
Oh, please.
As an Austrian, how did you like what stuck out the most to you about like American lifestyles? Because you must have seen like a huge variety of them driving through, right? Hitting the road.
Well, one thing, because of course, at least by the 2016 trip, I was very much into health. The one thing I was positively surprised with is that except the very first place I arrived at, almost all places had water filters that were, at least for me, decent enough that I was like, oh, this water is fine for me to drink. Maybe that's a strange
clean
water.
So clean water was like a novelty kind of?
Well, no, because in Austria, almost anywhere you are, it's kind of expected that the water has at least high quality, if not very high quality.
Oh, so you're like, our water's so bad. You're like, this is terrible.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, this actually, I could say, at least on the one trip, because when I first arrived, I mean, I was aware of this. I was more positively surprised than to realize anywhere where it would be necessary. Of course, understandably, most, I guess, I was hanging around like, middle, I don't know if you can even say that, middle class, what does it even mean or whatever. Most people having any awareness of this or having any interest in health, they had water filters, right? So the water was perfectly fine to drink. But the very first place I arrived, it was just like, oh, it was some friend's place and he was there, but his mother wasn't there or something. And then I was, super thirsty from a flight and everything. And they had this kind of lemonade, but this was like really sugary or something. I was like, I don't know. I was like, I need some water. And then I just go to the tap, just a little bit. I literally only take like 1 or 2 sips. And I was like, okay, I'm really thirsty, but I'm really not going to drink a lot of this water because there's so much chlorine in it or whatever, which is not something I hadn't experienced before. But just in terms of what sticks out for me, just because water is so important to me.
So could you feel your pineal gland calcifying like as you took sips of our water?
I think it wasn't that bad, but I can tell you, I overall felt strange because I was kind of dehydrated. It was really hot. I was like, I really want to drink, and like, oh damn, this is like the only thing I have right now. I'm not sure what I should be doing. So
listen up, Americans. Our water is messing up our chi or energy or whatever. Something weird's going on.
I mean, anybody should get, if they understand what this is about. This is another, topic unto itself. But anyone, even in Austria, should get a proper water filters, even if it's just simple ones. Doesn't need to be too fancy or expensive. But it definitely makes a huge difference. Even, anywhere you are. So I'm a huge proponent of water filters. But yeah, is there anything else, like, I don't know, ask about food or anything? Because I'm talking about the water system. It's kind of a strange cultural, it's not really a cultural thing at all.
All right, I'm sure, like, this goes for any living in any other country, but what about, like, if you're walking past a cafe or a bar and you hear music blasting, like, it's gonna, affect your vibe and kind of help set it. So what was the difference between, yeah.
Okay, I have something, maybe it's answering a question or not, but I think so. So basically what I really noticed, of course, I was in a good mood, you're in a different country, far away, you're with really nice people, you meet nice people all the time. So you're just happy dancing around, basically, literally. And what I just noticed, I mean, especially, of course, when I was in a good mood, people reacting positively and like very easily willing to strike up a random conversation, or just like, how are you, or something, or like to say something nice. So like the general openness, and I believe you call it positive politeness, is a lot greater than generally let's say in Austria, or at least in Vienna, or like in a bigger German city, where you definitely more have like this Nordic style generally of negative politeness, which would mean I'm being polite with you by not getting into your business, by not looking at you or anything like that. And in America, it seemed more to me that people are generally more open. And, I wasn't, let's say, necessarily looking to make random friends, because generally I met, friends through friends through friends, obviously, for the most part. But I just felt like they're more willing to just, share a nice word just like that next to the supermarket or whatever. So
I actually have a theory about that. Because when you look at like being raised or growing up in any very homogenized culture, everyone's so in tune in so many more ways than living in a place like of crazy diversity like America. So if you're raised around people who act like you do, who eat the same stuff as you do, who believe in the same stuff as you do, who even look like you, then you're going to be very in sync with each other in like a lot of ways. In fact, some people might find it invasive. Imagine living surrounded by people who could pretty much like read your patterns very, very well, because such an integral part of you, your culture, your cultural influences pretty much reflect theirs. So they could, at some point, like, you're going to instinctively want to clam up in that kind of environment. Whereas in America, where everyone's a lot more different on a cultural integral level like that, it's going to make us want to express, make us want to seek, make us want to learn how to be American, learn how to be like everyone else here. So I think like that, that's a very interesting, it's not, so basically what you're saying is like, everyone seems more closed off, but I don't know if that's necessarily because of any like toxic element or anything. It really might be because you guys like are so psychic between each other in a sense, where it's like, I know you as an Austrian because I'm an Austrian to such a degree, where it's not like that in America, like we don't have that kind of invasive like understanding of each other, of all of our neighbors,
Maybe it's a stretch the way you put it right now. On the one hand, of course, I mean, you still have a general diversity of whatever political alignment, thought, and other insanity within the indigenous autochtonic Austrian population. What you also have is you have, especially in Vienna, of course, a sizable population of all kind of former Balkan state, former communist, especially Yugoslavian states, and now also the forced migration or whatever from by now even culturally very and topographically very remote states, like Syria or Iraq or wherever else by now. So maybe this is also getting more mixed up, but I can't really speak to how well the whole integration works. Because what I was just thinking of is that maybe in America it's also special because it's generally seen as, the land of opportunity and to work your way up. English is maybe particularly easy to pick up. And then you maybe I would love to see real statistics, and it depends on the place, but maybe even have more immigration or diversity. I basically just want to point out that by now, aside from the diversity of individuals as themselves, even within a culture, we do have quite a few immigrant cultures or additional cultures by now. So I'm not sure if you could, let's say, put it plainly like that this would be able to explain how open people are. One thing that's usually associated with is the weather, that people say, oh, in warm states or in warm climates or in Barcelona in Spain or maybe in Florida or something, people are more open just because it's warmer and it like gives more leeway to chill out together in the evening in front of your porch or whatever. Yeah. So I'm sure there's many different aspects to it. But anyway, this is certainly one thing I noticed is like people generally being very open to like, yeah, strike a random conversation and just smile at each other and so on. Whereas maybe here, if someone would smile at you too much, you would go like, oh, you're creepy, you're strange, or, you know, what's going on? And there people are like, yo, yeah, it's, you know, it's a good day or whatever, you know? So, yeah, that was my impression. And the other thing, maybe of course, many cool things I could talk about for a long time, including funny conversations with the police in San Francisco. But main thing, of course, I don't know, have you experienced the Mandela Effect for any example that you're familiar with?
Probably like surface level ones if you pointed them out to me, like the Berenstain Bears or whatever, stuff like that. But I don't have an explanation for it. Like I never invested like enough contemplation on like what it could possibly be.
Right. So aside from any explanation, Andreas knows the story, but I'd love to bring it up since we're on the topic, and then we can move on from the travel log, unless it's still interesting to you. Basically, I experienced a Mandela effect in America. I wasn't aware of it yet because all I was doing, I was interested in health. I was eating lots of salad wherever I was, you know, just buying some salad, and you need some dressing, right? You don't want to eat some poison, and especially if you're in the US and you're from Europe, you're aware, like pay attention. You know, don't buy the Wonder Bread or whatever. And then I'm just, you know, seeking which vinegar am I going to buy. And I see this label, which looked to me pretty effed up and definitely not like, you know, high style, you know, S&P 100 big American conglomerate.
Not one of the big boys.
Exactly. But it was Bragg's apple cider vinegar, which maybe you're familiar with. They also have these amino acids. And at least compared to all the other labels, it looks, I want to say like crap, but it looks like, oh, maybe a family business, maybe something biological or whatever. Let's look. And then it was, oh, with the mother, this and that. Oh, it's nice. Okay, so I bought this Bragg's apple cider vinegar, and I bought it over the period of these 3 months in different states, in different supermarkets. And I was specifically seeking it out. I had never heard of it before. I never watched a commercial of it. I never saw it online. I had no idea it existed. And then I come back to home a few months later, and even a few months pass, and somehow this Mandela thing pops up, and I'm looking through it. I'm like, oh, very interesting. Maybe C-3PO has a golden leg or not, or Luke, I'm your father, or no, or I'm not sure what's happening. And then on these lists, one of the things is, oh, Mandela effect. Look at this. Bragg's apple cider vinegar. Oh, by the way, it's not Bragg's, but it's Bragg, which not only is a completely different pronunciation, but also, of course, makes the label look completely different. And this is one of these cases where I can be like, okay, either I'm completely insane. People want to say, oh, you were just too high to properly read the label or something. I'm like, I'm sorry, this is such an explicit experience with particular impetus behind it and motivation. I almost feel just in my own reality as if there is something like the source or God or any type of higher entity on any level, it was almost gifted to me to be like, look, make this experience. You will remember this very clearly. So then when it's being discussed, at least you know it's real. I also can't explain it to you, but either I can say, oh, I'm completely insane or retarded, or there's something strange happening because all the labels since ever now have changed to Bragg.
It's a phenomenological experience. I mean, that I could like, you know, speculate all day. I could imagine maybe it's maybe parallel realities are real, and you know, maybe on a conscious level we could tap into them because our one connection is ourselves. There's another version of us, you know, and all these different but slightly altered realities. I mean, who knows? Maybe your reality could align with a parallel reality so closely, and so like it might as well be one reality until it eventually splits off again, and maybe your memories split off too and get mixed up in that process. So, but you know, another interesting thing is like, why then? You know, why for that thing? And it could be as like you were getting that specific brand of apple cider vinegar at a very, very prominent time in your quantum existence. Like not just you in this reality, in this line, in this manifestation, but you were at like a major convergence point. You know, and specifically at a time when you were getting this apple cider vinegar. And then after that time passed, the realities deconverged again and went back on their respective paths. And your path just happens to remember, I swear that, you know, that apple cider vinegar was not that called that. And, you know, just some interesting like thought experiments, I guess. That's what I would come up with.
Oh, no, sure. I've contemplated some of those. All I can say is that with this example, I asked plenty of people, and yeah, many seem to remember the same thing as I do. And yeah, officially now, this never ever existed.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, next
All
we got
right.
yeah.
So what I basically wanted to show, so the next best thing to do is, maybe, I hope it works, if you just click on the flag, right? Exactly on this one, because it should pull up yeah, it's put up the right moments. Maybe just pause it. We can't hear it, but just pause it and enable the closed captions, the CC on the bottom right. And then maybe we can, if you make it on full screen.
Gotcha.
Yes, you're doing great. So yeah, you can scroll a little bit more back. Basically, this is the one fun thing I wanted to bring up. Anytime we're starting a show, Andreas is asking me, you can just let it run on B-roll like this. Andreas is asking me, oh, and how are you doing? And this is an American guy who is apparently lived in Austria for some time, and I have to say he's giving a very stellar review of Austria. Like, as an Austrian, or what, I don't even consider myself so much, but still culturally you can't help where you're born and embroidered with, or however you call it. He's giving a stellar review of Austria, and especially of Austrians. He's confirming the suspicion that not just the landscape is amazing, the infrastructure is pretty great, and also he's pointing out some, let's say, very positive view of personality traits that I hope can be generalized in the way he describes it. I'm not sure where exactly he was staying or who he was living with, but I was like, wow, I wish, this is really true the way he says it. And the one fun thing he just mentions here is the whole point about asking, how are you? And he just explains that, well, in America, it's just a thing you say. And in Austria, it can well be that, how are you? And then the guy is going to tell you his whole life story, or about his potentially terminal illness, or whatever it could be. And that's just a very different approach to it than what you may have in the US, where it's literally just a thing to say. And here it can be interpreted very differently. So anytime I'm asked on a show beginning like, how are you? I'm like, oh, you really want to know? Or you just, just say anything else, right? So it's also maybe a big cultural difference just in communication style, or I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I meant earlier. Like, when I was like, yeah, everyone's so in tune to each other culturally. Like, I imagine, like, they did this whole thing where I think there was like a little child was allowed to like wander the streets of like urban Japan for like the whole day, and like nothing bad happened to the child. And apparently, like, or maybe not so urban, I don't know, but and people were saying like, oh, look how much better that country was. And it's like, well, that's what you get with like a homogenized country, like a homogenized culture. Now, I'm not saying it's all good. I mean, there's definitely a lot of negatives to that, like just living around people that are pretty much a lot like you. But that whole idea of just a surface level question in a different out here in another country could just be translated to yeah, let's skip all the small talk. It's like like we all got to deal with more or less the same things and have the same concerns on many levels. So it's like eventually you're just going to skip all the surface cursory level stuff because each other on a cultural level already. So that's like my interpretation of it, or my guess, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a factor. Also, I haven't considered it that deeply. Also, of course, because one's own view is always skewed and biased by my own default setting experience of what is cultural diversity, here or right there, or how can it be perceived. But yeah, I can also definitely see what you're saying. Maybe a point to it. But anyhow, this guy, so if you listen to this, it makes you want to come to Austria. And I hope you have an experience exactly like this guy describes, because really I have to say it's a stellar review of Austria. I was really like, wow, I hope it is really like this. So yeah, the next thing we don't have to watch, let's see, just so we don't miss anything. Yeah, the Truman Show was produced by the Rothschild family. Did you know that? That's one more on the top. It's the third link on the top without the thing. Yeah, right. This is a video, I think, by Robot Polisher. Yeah, right. Something I wasn't aware of, I had recently become aware of this, is that apparently one of the, I believe, executive producers or something along those lines literally is part of the Rothschild family, at least by name, but we can assume that's not a coincidence. And then of course it is highly auspicious, suspicious, or whatever other word you would like to use, that they would explicitly be producing a video which is about, let's say, Earth cosmology, and further than that, more about this whole question as to what extent we are living, let's say, in a contained system. We could both be talking about this in a potentially physical sense, where we don't know, what really are the barriers, how far can we really explore, both in terms of physicality, also in terms of what maybe military would allow, and just this whole idea in terms of to what extent are we really aware of the world that is around us, to what extent are we aware of the larger systems that are surrounding us. And I'm sure you watched the Truman Show. I think it's a great mind game, even without the whole question, what is the shape of the Earth or anything, although there's many clues there as well. Just this basic idea of, breaking out of your preconceived limitations of what the world or how large the world could be. And I'm not sure, have you watched Attack on Titan? That's
Yes.
always what it reminds me of, where at the very beginning, they have no idea what's going on. They're confined within these walls. They maybe have some idea something more could exist. And by the end of season 3, you're like, dang, this world has turned around like 10 times in terms of what the actual thing is that could be going on. And I just think that's a great analogy also to the process of human consciousness. When you learn about more things, how your perspective can shift, and how, and I just think that movie shows that process quite nicely.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think one big part of it, I mean, if you also reference like a lot of ancient teachings and ancient metaphysical wisdom, they all kind of allude to this idea that the universe isn't as material or as physical as we're led to believe or we're conditioned to believe. A lot of it could just be pointing to the fact that reality is in fact a product of our consciousness or a product of consciousness and not the other way around. And if that's true, and you want to talk about like like living under a closed system without really realizing it, I mean, that's the way to do it. It's to trick people into believing that their consciousness is downstream from a physical reality. So they're living in a constant state of realities happening to me. I'm a product of my environment. Like I basically can't do anything. I have absolutely no degree of dominion of control over my experience in this life. And like that's like the most ultimate prison of all, right? Like it's the prison of the mind. It's the prison of perspective. It's being locked into this idea of perception and failing to see perspective and understanding, like, if you're not your mind or your body or your soul, you're something in between. And that nature of consciousness, which is like a lot deeper and probably above my pay grade. But I think when it comes to enforcing like a closed system without people like realizing it, this is also going to tie back to what I said before. It's fear. And I'm not just talking about like fear of monsters or fear of like giants about to eat you at the gates, but also like fear of lack, fear of scarcity, fear of not having enough of something, fear of dying. And one way to do that is to close you off spiritually, is to close off a section of your consciousness. Maybe what if we just make people believe all they are is their mind and body, and they don't have souls or spirits, or they're non-spiritual entities just living completely as a freak byproduct of nature. And that's a good way to enforce it. That's a really, really good way to enforce such a prison where you believe you're a product of your environment. And that's kind of like how I would take that away, with like the whole suspicious aspect of the Truman Show kind of being like programming to enforce this idea of you can't even trust your reality, man. Like,
yeah, I mean, on a level, I would say this movie is almost like, I mean, I don't know, it's a cult revelation of the method or something like that. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's definitely a great movie though. I love it. I absolutely do. It's classic. Let's see.
But yeah, so what you said in terms of the human consciousness, that's definitely a cornerstone of the whole thing. Although by now I would almost say, by the actions that, let's say, the media or propaganda system takes, both in the overt way and in the more occult way, it almost leans more credence to the idea that human consciousness is vital and is very creative and relevant in shaping reality, both just logically, like I think something, I act in a certain way, also likely metaphysically, because I don't see how otherwise so much money would be spent that people, believe in all the lies and contribute with their emotional energy. They run around in the circuit, they cheer on the football team and all of that, and all the other things. I'm not sure if so much money would be spent on that and not rather just, really drastically already have reduced the population, just ship a few slaves and something. They seem to be needed for something else. Aside from the fact, as always, there can be different factions also on the higher levels. Maybe some are not completely genocidal. But still, it seems there is some more like emotional consciousness aspect where it's actually relevant that people actively participate, but instead of sovereignly, creating their own reality with their friends and family, spending their emotional energy or loosh, or however you would call it, on that system, because there seems so much to be focused on making sure that this energy is being pulled away in that direction.
Well, to do that,
yes.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna add, to do that consciously. I mean, I was just talking about this before with some friends, and we were discussing like gratitude, and one of the people in the chat, they just had this really staunch take against gratitude as a concept. They were making the claim that gratitude is immoral because it's robbing you, it's compromising your own agency to actually change your negative realities. And I would argue, well, I mean, how can you expect to change your negative reality if you can't even appreciate or be grateful for the tools that you would use or utilize to get yourself out of those negative situations? And when we talk about like fear being like the main driver or the main fuel for this matrix or this closed enforced prison system, if you use fear to enforce it, then I guess gratitude has to be like on the other end of that spectrum in a more healing aspect. It has to be like the negating aspect of fear. If you're grateful for what you have, and if you could put yourself in a state where you progressively can become more grateful for more and more things in life, eventually you reach a state where it's like, I mean, and then you ask yourself, well, how do I get there? How do I get to a point where I can have more to be grateful for? And then, I think that's a good avenue for like kind of a certain way of developing outside of that prison pattern frequency,
Yeah, so there's, different processes and paths to take. And I would want to say some advanced emotional kung fu that can go insofar as to even potentially neutralize all emotions. Yes. So you don't emotionally even react to anything anymore, at least on the first layer, at least not to be shocked anymore. But yeah, there is this saying, count your blessings. And as to the point you were making, even just the idea of for a moment considering my reality in the perspective of gratitude, just be like, oh, I'm happy because whatever, I can watch this right now, what you're watching. Thank you everyone for watching. Or I can, have a sip of water or whatever I can. Otherwise, everyone, again, listen back to the any Africast made by Exertus with Abiza. He's literally sitting there at night somewhere in Nigeria without running water, with a light, and he's got better studio lighting than most of us with this one light. Yeah. So who's got any real problems?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very tricky thing. So if we could understand that good things tend to happen, in terms of our reality when we're in a state of gratitude, like you ask yourself, yeah.
Just to reinforce it, and then I'll let you go on, because now
I'm sorry.
The point
Keep
again.
going. Yeah.
Because even just this idea of considering everything from a perspective of gratitude puts you, heart rate variability, magnetic field, whatever, in a more relaxed state that you can perfectly reason psychologically, physiologically, whatever. And then whatever else it may or may not do metaphysically, but even just the act of having a perspective of gratitude completely shifts, I even want to say hormonal state and so on. I can't vouch for that, but you can sense by adopting a different stance, you have a different feeling in your body. Maybe you relax, you're not so tensed up. And that again gives then rise to other processes in the body that would just make it more likely that whenever the next situation occurs, you would be in a more relaxed state when you react, which more likely makes you make a better decision than if you completely wrapped in fear, which is what you've been talking about.
Yes. And I definitely agree with that wholly. And, if we can agree on that, then what I would say is, all right, so that let's ask ourselves, what are the things that make us turn away from gratitude, turn away from that state? What are the things, first of all, what are the things that reinforce that? And what are the things that disrupt that? And like, I can't, the obvious thing to me is reinforcing a state of fear, scarcity, not having enough. And what reinforces gratitude is just making the conscious decision to say even if you're not being sincere about it. I truly believe saying thank you out loud kind of shifts you even if slightly, but it does shift your state, your vibrational state or your frequency, which is very interesting to me. I find this all very interesting because we're talking about like then creating your reality, you know, like what other what higher art form is there, you know?
Yes, so I've been deep into these topics that you're talking about for quite a few years. I almost want to say I stepped back in a bit, but not really, but
Yeah.
more to be like how to be even more pragmatic about it, let's say. But you know, everything is a process. What I also like are these comments. So someone says toxic positivity is real. Someone else says, I think, Wandering Star, I think pain, fear, and sadness should be appreciated as much as happiness. I think getting burned out or turning numb is a product of only thinking about the good. What do you say?
Well, I think on the topic of
I'm making the rune sign here. Yes.
on the topic of toxic positivity, I mean, because I think the real mistake is trying to go for positive or negative. I mean, because if you really understand the nature of, I guess, our little prison reality, you would understand that you can't stop negative events or negative realities just as much as you can't stop your reality from becoming positive. So if you were going to picture it in like a practical way, imagine like a pendulum swinging between positive moments and negative moments. Now, the only thing you could be sure of in your own life is that pendulum is never going to stop swinging, ever. As good as things get is as bad as things will get, you know, back and forth it goes, right? So my thing is if you understand that you can't stop that pendulum, and it's only when you try to keep that pendulum in place is when bad things really happen. It's no, I want my life to stay in the framework of positivity, or no, I want my life to stay in the realm of negativity. Neither is true. Therefore, you're just going to end up you're messing up your whole system. However, if you could acknowledge that, anticipate that, then you could understand that, like I said, as good as things, positive as things get, as negative things will get. So what can you do with that? Well, you could say, okay, so if we could understand higher states and lower states, like, you know, lower states where you're just more in tune with your physical surroundings, where you're really in tune with like our animal urges and animal desires, well then, yeah, that's when things are good. That's when you sink to your lower state so you could enjoy the hell out of it. Now, when things get bad, that's when you tap into your higher state, which is why we pray and meditate and do all sorts of like holistic exercises and practice these traditions. That's the higher understanding that, you know, good and bad things will keep cycling through each other, like that. You can't stop that. That's just a truth of life. So on the top, you could avoid toxic positivity if you stop trying to freeze things in a positive place. Like why fear negativity? Negativity is natural just as much as positivity is, right? So that's how I would kind of contend with that.
Yeah, I think you're speaking of the, let's say, quote unquote, outward manifestation, which interpretation of which, of course, is entirely contingent upon the subjective interpretation. So the same thing can appear very bad for someone and very positive for somebody else. Maybe that's the caveat to be added here. But what I really like about what you just said is in terms of lower state and higher state, and who is entering in what state and when. I did definitely notice that there is a propensity, even for some very strange high energy states, in apparently particularly bad situations. I mean, everyone even knows this. An accident or anything occurs, and then suddenly the system is tuned up to like 10x capacity. Again, makes me think of some animes or whatever. But so that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Are you looking at this huge screen there? That's a pretty cool setup.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Just because I'm seeing that you have another screen. That's cool.
Yeah, I was just doing some multitasking.
Isn't fake positivity a bad thing promoted mostly by victimized women? Well, I'm not going to speak to victimized women, but yeah, fake positivity definitely is a thing. And yeah, I think Terrorisk just explained it quite nicely. Overall, I guess, you know, trying to enjoy the ride, whatever happens. And once you learn some tools, at least if you want to, I think, my experience, you can go through everything with a little bit of equanimity. And also, if on some level, whether it's true or not really, you believe or you feel or you trust that you have some other form of existence simultaneously, and ultimately this is just a quite advanced role-playing game. Then also it makes which helped me a lot. So I'm still not 100% sure if that's correct, but there's quite a bit of evidence towards that. And then of course, if it's just insert coin again after this life, then everything can be seen not to be so dramatic always necessarily, because if it really is only one of many lives, or only one moment in any form of eternal perspective or existence or unity, then nothing really is lost, and then it's like, okay,
then you could feel content, then you could feel at peace, then you could truly enjoy the ride. I mean, I don't.
Technically, even if you wanted to change it or you wanted to improve it, I believe it would even put you in the better state to go about that, rather than only being, aggressive or whatever it would be. Would also be a natural response. But if you can laugh about it, you can actually be more effective in whatever you then want to do or change in the reality.
I agree, and I would also add that a lot of people who like come across this stuff take this as purely like a cerebral experience. It's like, I think it's just as physical as it is like mental. Like, for example, there's a lot of people who neglect the body, as they try to seek further higher understanding, and they eventually say, well, if it's one of many lives, then why do I need to care for this physical body? But I do think it's so integral. And yeah, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No. I'm just like shaking my head because I'm agreeing with what you're saying, or shaking my head in dismay at whatever the other individuals may have considered or proposed, simply because it's quite obvious, just as if you see it like an electrical system or whatever, you need a grounding device or a generator, or however you need a hardware, and the body simply is the hardware to receive the signal of your consciousness. That's how I would interpret it. And if the receiver is like borked and not properly configured and no updates or whatever, and not the antenna is not aligned, then of course signal is not going to come through properly. And that's actually also potentially the root cause, let's say, of quite a few of various diseases that individuals have, because their body is so polluted with heavy metals or whatever, the signal is not getting through properly. Well, no surprise, you now officially have, X disease, supposedly autoimmune or whatever. It's just this type of misalignment, which usually can also be remedied.
Well, I love that you use that word alignment, because I don't like, when I discuss these things, it's not like I'm trying to glorify like, oh, stronger, better, faster, more efficient necessarily, or like right and wrong, or like the good ideas and the bad ideas. I think of self-alignment as in the three aspects of self: mind, body, and soul. If you could get those three to just not work against each other, if you could just get them to align, not necessarily be stronger or weaker or right or wrong, but if you could get them, where they're not attacking each other, that's automatically like going to work like an engine that just generates more and more mana, energy, chi.
Ultimately, yes. Nothing I can disagree with here. Let's see if I manage myself to put this up again. Oh no, that's a different
I got it. Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah, so the Naxanor thing, we don't really need to open it. I mentioned the whole Mr. Beast stuff in previous videos. Don't even want to go into it. But if anyone wants to have a good comedy, they can click on that link. I stumbled across this guy who basically always uses this AI avatar, which can be kind of distracting, but also somewhat hilarious. And he's just doing, let's say, drama commentary or whatever. But here he's basically just looking at the most recent video and pointing out in a very nitpicky fashion all the more or less obvious things in terms of how much this video was staged. Whereas we know, of course, one of the big claims he always makes is nothing is staged and nothing is changed or whatever. And this is particularly hilarious because this is like a boys versus girls challenge. This guy commenting is just pretty good at pointing out like how various points are fudged and how like they very disparagingly, in this case, I guess, show the men, or, of course you can imagine. And supposedly they're somewhere in the wilderness for 70 days, but it might as well be that they're just there like for a week, just to make it seem dramatic, right? But yeah, and just because it's not often, but literally had to laugh a few times when I was watching this. So that's why I just put it up, because this guy can be pretty funny.
Would you say Mr. Beast content is more masculine coded, or not really any either or?
I haven't really watched it. I'm not. How do you mean?
Because like
I've only seen a few through the commentaries, but in terms of target audience,
yeah, like there's like a spectrum of like gender demographics that like content is usually you could see them kind of like gearing or targeting that kind of either or side of that spectrum.
Well, I think the main spectrum is like I guess mainly under 20, under 18, under 16.
Yeah, so
I
it's
don't
not.
know.
So it's more like like universally appealing. I guess that's what he's probably going for.
I mean, I guess universally appealing in terms of genders, I guess maybe yes. Here
Yeah.
it's more the question if he's like playing on some currently viable cultural tropes in terms of how man or woman should be portrayed. Basically, he's making the joke all the time. He's saying like, oh, how did he pick these guys? It looks like the guys are like, you know, quote unquote random hobos or whatever. And the girls seem to be like, you know, all trained survival experts. So even there, it already seems like it's kind of a setup. Yeah, like a
Wow.
little bit strange. Many other things, but it was just kind of hilarious because he's really focusing on that topic or on that perspective, and I think he's kind of got a point there. Yeah, for today there's not even so much. So this one, the Global Vision presents. This is a video I just recently saw. I actually have to watch it myself, but it's from Michelle Gibson. So I'm pretty sure this will be nice. I think. Okay, this is not part of it because that's the ad, but I think that this may simply, you know, refer to old architecture stuff, and just some of the people were commenting, and I thought it's a nice video to check out. It's
Okay.
just this whole Tartaria rabbit hole in terms of architecture and so on. And Michelle Gibson's work, I'm not sure I'm familiar with her. I think Andreas interviewed her as well. She's talking about the ley lines and the energy grids and the
Nice.
old architecture, and she's also has a pretty good series called the U.S. Statutory Hall or something. And there she's just going through, I guess it's in the Congress or the Senate or something. They have these statutes, yeah, of supposedly famous Americans. And Michelle Gibson does series where she's just going through the official history of these individuals and just showing, how should I say, how strange these histories are of these supposed American heroes that have statues in these halls, or that turn out to be, you know, super grand Bill Gates style philanthropists and all of that. And it's just, she's doing really good research, also recommended by David Nguyen Jr., whom I have interviewed a lot, and Andreas has interviewed as well. But I believe Andreas also at least has one interview with Michelle Gibson herself. So it's always good thing to point out. And the only other thing on the list, but I almost don't want to pull it up because
I want to ask you though, how do you feel about the quote that architecture is three-dimensional music?
I mean, honestly, just looking at it and just knowing the shape of the star for it, so even here you see the gardens, which at least partially still seem to be based on these principles. It's obvious that there's like semantic patterns. Of course, there you have the free energy thing, this and that, which is not exactly clear yet what it could really be, to what extent does it work with what we now call churches. Could they be something like low energy nuclear power plants, something to do with water boiling, something to do with healing with the organs, something to do with energy transmission,
or frequency, like affecting your vibrational frequency with the sound acoustics.
Exactly, as well. Or I can just imagine, you know, great effects occurring if you have proper frequencies and infuse them into the water, then you distribute that water to the population. I mean, that's, if I were like, quote unquote, the ruler of the whatever system, that's one of the first things I would be installing.
I mean, that's probably,
what I understand now. Yeah,
that's probably the basis of holy water. You know, it's like imparting your frequency, your spiritual frequency onto the water. So yeah, it's got like a historical basis. You know.
Guardian Jackpot says Bill Gates is compensating for his wickedness with philanthropy. Are you perfectly sure about that? Have you looked into his philanthropy and what it entails exactly? I think rather he is not compensating, but compounding his wickedness. But, you know, what can you do if you're part of the control system from birth, most likely, if you look at his early pictures?
I think I saw this one funny video suggesting that they were pointing out how Bill Gates had this initiative to go to Africa and set up these like water foundries that could turn fecal water, like fecal infested water, into drinkable, potable water. And then he was like, that's how you know this guy is evil. He's going to like poor countries and he's just figuring out ways to get them to drink poop. And I was like, wow, if you put it that way, you know, I thought that was funny. I don't know if that's really his nefarious intention to just get people in third world countries to drink their own feces. I don't know if that's true, but it's kind of messed up.
The thing is, yeah, I don't know enough about it. I just know, I think Andreas had brought this up with Abize on Africast about how different water companies, I guess Nestle, from Switzerland, with
Yeah.
a long-time Austrian CEO, not sure who it is right now, just making sure they don't have proper water supply and no wells, and even apparently got into a fight with Mr. Beast of all people over this, because the one maybe actually interesting thing he was doing these wells. And then of course you have all these water bottle companies or Nestle at the forefront, not wanting it to cut into their profits in their, still colonialized regions of the world. And here it's just so cool just because they're now showing these insights. You have so many buildings like this in Vienna. I mean, even like this, not maybe that big, but there's some temple reconstructions also. And it's just so insane because if you would want to imagine there's a different world when you go through the Vienna city center and the Ring Street and so on, like the main street around the first district, it's full of these like old world style buildings. And to me, honestly, it always looked kind of out of place. I'm still not claiming that I figured out anything really about it, but it still very much hints at, some sort of hidden technology and some sort of hidden civilization. So yeah, that's just wanted to bring out that video or bring it up because she's really doing cool stuff. And I hope at some point we'll figure it out with the frequency what we know. Also, Andreas interviewed drive technologies. We interviewed healing and balance. There is different health technologies even available today that do work with frequency.
Yes.
And that do have different effects. So that's a real thing.
I used one. It's this little thing. It's like a tiny pick, like a metal pick. I think it's like surgical stainless steel at the tip. But what it does, it vibrates at a very high frequency. So basically you put it on your plaque and it doesn't use like chemicals or abrasion to break apart the plaque. It vibrates at such a high frequency that it just breaks it down. And I thought that was like the sickest because it works. I used it and I was like, this is pretty cool. Imagine doing this with cancer cells,
Exactly. So because if it was something physical like that, there was one, let's say, frequency range. But from what I understand, yes, you can have other frequencies that you wouldn't even notice or hear at all. And they also have an effect on the body. And yeah, there's amazing things. And now just imagine if it could be that, especially, I mean, with the decorations and so on, even and the cymatic patterns, it very much looks like they could well be part of a larger circuit. And then it just makes sense. And think of it, if you have such a big system that's also just attuned to general wellness through frequency healing, for lack of a better term, and water purification, I mean, you probably don't need any doctors,
I mean, it does even sound that like conspiracy. I mean, it doesn't sound like pseudoscience that much because you could actually see the effects of, sound on water. That's what cymatics essentially does, among like sand and other material. But the fact that it works so well on water and expresses itself so clearly on water, I mean, most of our bodies are water, and you could literally see how like discordant frequencies make discordant looking patterns, and more harmonic frequencies create more beautiful patterns, more intricate and more ordered patterns. And yeah, that's pretty much thinking like if you scale that out to the effect that it has on your body, which is mostly water, I mean, what could that do to you?
Maybe since we're on YouTube already, and only if you want, maybe if you just put in Masaru Emoto, either cymatics or rice experiment. I always like to bring this up. This is really an amazing experiment which everyone can do at home. So, and it's also, of course, oh, there it is.
Which one?
But it's interesting, the second, this one also, but also the second video. So here you can show this first as a nice B-roll. From what I understand, Masaru Emoto, by his education, actually was a political scientist. And this admittedly was an art project, meaning that he selected particular pictures out of many pictures. And also, of course, you could say, how should I say, there's certain biases in the selection and in the process, all of that. However, what does exist, and this is what Post is writing about, I believe, is the rice experiment, which is also called rice-Hado experiment. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not.
So if you maybe go back and then you have like the third video from the top, then we can see it, at least the basic outline. Yeah, this one. Third, yeah, love, ignore, hate, love. Yes, the impossible rice experiment. See, it has 1 million views.
Wow.
Let's
Yeah.
have a nice one. I wasn't even aware that, because when I researched this quite a few years ago, but maybe before that, there were only a few like small videos. So it's good if there is a, let's say, good documentation video. So basically what you do is at home, you cook rice according to your own standards, if you want. And if you're, very materialistic or whatever, do it in a, I want to say vacuum chamber, but like use gloves or whatever you want.
Okay.
And then what you do is you simply put the very same rice in 3 different containers. One of them you label love, one hate, and one ignore. That is actually more for your reference. You can also technically then meditate upon it with these feelings of either love and acceptance, gratitude, or, hate, fear, terror. The third one you just leave at the side, and you can technically then do that meditation every day. You can just leave the labels. It depends on yourself how you want to do it exactly. And then you can leave it for a few days, and then you will see quite dramatic results. You can maybe skip towards the end, where we can ideally see the result. I think you can see it in the indication. So that's, I guess, when they start, and then towards the end, you can see the result.
All right. Some kind of energy, vibrations. So he's projected the thoughts on, oh, shoot. Wow.
And this is the same rice, and technically the ignore rice should be the worst. Let's see here, it looks kind of moldy. The hate one is even worse, at least from this perspective. And let's see the love rice.
Wow.
Oh, it's nice.
The secret ingredient truly is love.
And here now the thing is, because many people like to criticize Masaru Emoto's work, like I said, for being an art project, maybe rightfully so. Then other people even criticize these experiments and say it's not done like this or like that or like whatever. But to all of those people, I can only say, I'm sorry. You have a kitchen at home, you have a rice, whatever thing. You can do this yourself if you can watch the stream, most likely. And just try it at home. Just try it yourself. And repeat it 10 times if you want to. Have your friends do it, and please report back with the results. I hardly ever heard of someone that gave an honest or a trustworthy account that would say that this does not work as expected. I tried it myself. It worked as expected. So what can I say?
Document your rice experiments, guys. Document it and share it. Doing God's work.
For me, that's like really the most simple experiment where you can at least show there is some quote unquote spooky action at a distance at Einstein, who is its own topic with relativity. But anyways, that's the thing he mentioned, right? But some type of quantum effect, some type of thought, because the rice is the same, it's sealed, there is no exchange of air molecules or anything like that. And unless you yourself, I don't know, put in something else in one of those, they're all, perfectly the same. So this is how you can then prove to yourself there is at least some sort of an effect that is non-material, or that does not go through the 3D plane, but at the very least is some sort of electromagnetic frequency your brain emits, or your heart, or whatever you want to imagine. But there is something there. And if something is there, just like you said, we're mainly composed of water. If it can have that effect to like rice that's in the bottle, standing somewhere around in my room, what effect will it have on my own body, which is directly attached, to my brain or my heart or whatever else you may believe the resonance comes from? Yeah, as you had mentioned earlier. Yeah, and these are nice. I'm sure you know about those semantic experiments, right?
Yes. But then again, like that, I also, this is where it goes into conspiracy, because like music is such a heavily distributed commodity. I mean, we treat it like a commodity, but it's almost like we can't escape music, and is the music we're consuming actually conducive to well-being and purity and harmonization, or is the music that's constantly being fed to us, is it more in accordance with discord and disharmony and chaos and fear and anxiety? So these, I mean, I don't know the answers to these questions, but I think about them.
I mean, very, very honestly, I don't think this has to be a conspiracy, because the easiest thing you could do is, I almost want to say get a smartwatch. Don't get a smartwatch, but get some kind of, how you call it, simple blood pressure measuring device or something like this.
Yeah.
And just listen to the different music and see how you react. I'm sure there's institutes that have done this. The one that's done a lot is called Heart Math Institute. They measure heart rate variability, and I believe also to some extent the magnetic field of the body, and those definitely change. Maybe it depends on your subjective approach to the things as well, to some extent, I'm sure. But there is, let's say, a generic effect, and I'm very sure, I mean, just listen to whatever is supposedly pop music right now.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, what can I tell you? It makes you go insane. So,
I mean, I think about this stuff because I like to produce music. I mean, not professionally, but I've been doing it long enough to know my way around like a digital audio workstation. And one of the main tools you use is an equalizer plugin. And what it does is, let's say you feed a sample or an instrument or like just basically a thing that plays. It could be like a drum roll, it could be like a chord sequence, it could be a melody, and whatever channel that it gets fed through on the mixer, you get to control it along whatever plugins or whatever device you're using to manipulate the sound. Now the equalizer, what that does, it presents the entire frequency that the song fills, and you get to carve away pieces of it. Like take a block of wood, and if you want to make two blocks of wood fit together, you have to carve certain pieces away from one wood so it doesn't clash with parts of the other, so they could fit together like a puzzle piece. Now once like I understood that to that level, then I like figured out like, oh, I guess frequency actually does affect our bodily states more than just like the music that we listen to. And that's when I started exploring like tunings in different frequencies. And I think this stuff really matters because for me, like I realized, okay, so if reality is defined in a product of our state of consciousness, where at least 2/3 of it is dictated by our mood and our thought patterns and our beliefs and our ideas, music is a very, very, very big deal. I mean, if you take it for granted, it's probably going to hit you way harder. Its effect, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've always been sensitive to music, and even before understanding any of the lyrics, listening to like old or newer 90s, 2000s hip hop or whatever, even then, before I understood it, I could hear, oh, I like this song and this song and this song. And then a few years later, I actually listen at the lyrics, try to properly understand, and I'm like, oh, what a surprise. This is actually quite positive, uplifting lyrics and ideas presented. And the other stuff is more like whatever. So you can sense it also in a way.
100%.
So yeah, here just to bring out the comment by post, Dr. Gerald Pollack and Easy Exclusion Zone Water. It's what you get if you leave chia seeds in water overnight. Basically the skin on the water, which is really hard, if not impossible to get otherwise. Okay, that's really interesting. I was not aware that this is what's forming around the chia seeds, but that's a great analogy. And if it is really that type of water and you can create it like that, that's of course even more special. Yeah, I'm not gonna, let's say, explain more or go through this now, but this is definitely something everyone should check out. His research is really interesting, also relates to water, to the potential ways the body can, let's say, absorb and use water. And just as we're on the topic, maybe you can bring it up, a website called, I'm gonna pull it up for you.
Okay.
Dancing with Water. Let's see if we have it, because I think you'll be interested in this as well. I'm posting it in the private chat, then you can pull it up.
Gotcha.
Thank you. So yes, this is a really interesting book. MJ Pangman, who wrote this, initially wrote a book with Moo Shik Yeon, who was a Korean professor who for many years researched the whole water structure thing quite deeply at a South Korean university. And later she wrote this book where she talks about different water filtration systems and different principles. And the main thing I always like to bring up here, she talks about something called hydrogen efficiency zone, which is also why she calls it dancing with water, because according to, I want to say, preliminary research, there is this particular state found in certain athletes, but can also be found, I guess, when you're dancing at a party or at a festival or something. Basically, if you're in a, maybe I would say, high mood, I want to say high voltage state. I'm not sure if that's correct, but like a high, at least high frequency state to a certain extent, like an athlete in an extreme situation, or you're dancing or something like that. The body actually can switch its energy production method away from the other systems, which I'm not going to go through now, into a hydrogen production method or hydrogen processing method, whereas hydrogen is burned with zero waste, so zero residue in the body, zero negative effects, but it creates crazy amounts of energy. And I think that's incredibly interesting, because in any case, we haven't understood water enough. And even just the idea here that, at least in particular cases, you can directly get extreme amounts of energy from hydrogen. It's just now I'm thinking back, this will most likely also harken back to whatever old technology the current churches had with all the water reservoirs or something. There's probably something related to this as well, because somehow it would only make sense that whatever we build, if it was built by humans, we would build something, microcosm, macrocosm, which somehow reflects our internal processes and capacities.
Oh yeah.
So just makes sense that they also, using water. Big
like
surprise.
cars function like bodies,
Yeah, it's a very modern, rudimentary understanding of the digestive system.
Yeah. No, it's also that's interesting you say that. Like, just being in a certain state, depending on what you're doing, like a high level athletic activity can put you in a state where it metabolizes, I guess, energy just at a much more efficient, optimal rate. I think I still talk about this sometimes, and it's not something I necessarily want to talk about, but I feel compelled to while the experience is fresh. So when I bring up like a recent quote unquote spiritual awakening, like a state like, where I was living through life, believing life happened to me, and then finally understanding it's like, oh, I am life, and I'm just a focal point of the universe experiencing itself and all that stuff. But one of the events that led up to it was a martial arts tournament. Because I was just, at the time, like getting out of a breakup, and this martial arts tournament came, and I was already like a few years deep in my practice. So I was like, you know what? I told all my friends and family, like, if I don't get first place in this tournament, I'm going to shave my head. And, this was months out. So like, I just trained super duper hard. I was denying myself alcohol. I was going on like intermittent fasting. I was doing like a high protein diet, and I was training high intensity. Like, I never cared about something that much before in my life, because this was, I never tried to win anything. Like, I was never competitive. I never fully went after something that was a physical contest that I truly believed I could win. And it was at the point where some mornings, like, I would stand in the shower, literally envisioning what it would be like to win first place in something for the first time ever. And, the pressure built up over time. Even my dad was like saying like, oh yeah, that tournament's coming up. Are you going to shave your head or not? And it's like, I don't know. And then finally the tournament day came, and I won. Like, I got first place. I went through all the brackets and I won. And then I remember like afterwards when we were like being called up to be given our like medals and awards, like there was this invasive thought I had. It was brief, right? But it was just this brief image of like my ex having sex with someone else. I don't know who that person was. It was just this thought, the possibility of it. And like, I looked at that thought and I was like, no, I just denied it. I was like, there's no way you're going to ruin this moment, because I've never experienced anything like this before in my life. You're like, I was the first time I contended against my own like ego. I was like, no, we're not doing this. My head's not going there. I'm going to be right here. I'm going to stay right here. And then a few days after that, it just led up to this like contemplation where I was like, oh shit, like, I understand what I am fully now. It's like, to harm another is to harm me. Like, everyone's just the same soul living different lifetimes in different bodies. And, and it was all physical. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Like, it would put me in such a physical state of like self-directed stress, I guess you could say, pressure. I was like, geez, yeah. So that's pretty much, that was just my whole story about that.
I know. Yeah. These things can work in mysterious ways. And then, you thought you were going to win a tournament, but who knows, maybe you reclaimed, let's say, quote unquote, a significant part of your consciousness in a certain way. Yeah. So
yeah. That's really what it felt like.
The real prize.
Yeah. Because I remember, that's why it's so significant and the memory is so fresh, because the life experience was night and day. I remember what my life felt like waking up every day before that. And then the day after I won, I woke up. I even went to sleep that night wondering, like, am I gonna go back to feeling shitty the next day? Am I gonna go back to feeling like old Chris again? And then I wake up the next day, I was like, nah, it's not, it wasn't the same again, because I understood if I really wanted something that seems out of reach at the time, I could put myself in a state. I can't control what happens to me, but I could control how I respond. I could control how I choose to go about things. And that was like a big enlightening moment.
Yes, and whatever we can speculate metaphysically, let's say on a basic psychological level, that is most certainly correct. And that is what I like to call interpretational sovereignty, which is what we always have, and how we
Yeah.
can always, decide to look at things from the dark side or from the bright side. And at least sometimes it's good to know both and not only be stuck with the negative. At
Yeah.
least.
I mean, that's like the state we're primarily conditioned to be in, is in that survival mode state. We could have
Yes.
all of our material needs met, but there's so many forces telling you, oh, you don't have enough of this, you don't have enough money, oh, you're still single, what the hell is wrong with you? You don't have kids, you should have kids by now. Like, where's your 100K a year job? Like, all sorts of stuff that's just making you not
Where's
feel
your
good.
house? Where's your certificate? Where is
Yeah.
your social validation or whatever? Yes, of course. Yeah. The world. Yeah. But then again, if it's all just a high level role playing game, it's a big joke considering it from that perspective. But yeah.
It is, I mean, and it is a joke. And the ironic part is, it's like once you're in that state where it's like things just start happening for you, right? Like, because like, my theory is not like, oh, good things magically attach themselves to you when you're in a high vibrational state, but it's more like opportunities are passing us every single day. But if you're not in the state to engage with it for a positive outcome, and you need energy, you can't have beliefs working against you, and you can't have an unhealthy, like a drastically unhealthy body preventing you from doing stuff.
Yes. So all I want to say, I guess in summation, is basically all this, let's say, somewhat perception, maybe kind of woo-woo, metaphysically seeming stuff, definitely can also be perfectly pragmatically explained to be beneficial, even from a purely materialistic and even egoistic point of view. I find that interesting. Yeah. So like the things I mentioned before with gratitude, or what you just mentioned, these are things that just can be applied by anyone who wants to. Whether you believe in then attracting any reality or not doesn't matter. But overall, being more relaxed and not being in a fear-driven state just does give you more options by default. Yeah. So that's definitely things, I guess, almost anyone listening can find some common ground. Yeah, we have the dancing with water, and then the last thing, almost don't click it because it's gonna like violate all YouTube guidelines. What is supposed to say or not. I'm not sure if they updated it or not. One time on Nachiketa's channel, we even went through the current guidelines. So I'm just going to point out, it's on the link list. The last thing is basically a document that was brought to my attention again. This had been translated 4 years ago when the whole lockdown thing started.
Yes.
Apparently, supposedly a translation by French Army Reserve officers giving advice on the current thing. The thing is, it was translated by Claire Edwards, whom I also interviewed. The interview we did was great. The few talks I had with her were great. I can't, let's say, vouch for the validity or veracity of the source document because this is her English translation. I didn't now look for the French original. I can't decidedly say by the grammar or the content whether this clearly is originally a military document or not. But in any case, it has a few interesting ideas. Some of actually I don't agree with because in the document they speculate the whole lab angle, whereas regular listeners will understand I'm more on the perspective of Dr. Stefan Lanka and, for example, Christine Massey, who simply asked all these virology institutions, please, can you give me an isolate of the thing that you're claiming we have to be scared of? And strangely enough, nobody could produce any isolate. So there's, more to say about virology. But anyways, there's a few cool sections in it. First of all, some good meta-analysis politically and economically, and also just some interesting recommendations for various essential oils. You have to imagine this document was written maybe 2 months after the whole crisis started worldwide. So this was kind of meant as a first emergency response document to both make aware of the larger implications. It also mentions, I believe, Gavi and the whole Gates connection and the medical industry financial connection.
Essential oils,
yes.
like thieves oil or something?
Yeah. Like, I don't think exactly this one, but like a few particular ones where they're just like, okay, assuming there is some type of an agent that is problematic, according to this and this analysis, these are the things I guess they will simply be things that are good for your respiratory system or something like that. Yeah, they will have their own logic. But anyway, it's just interesting to see such a document, especially if it was written so early on, and does give quite some good advice. Again, I don't agree with all the background theory, but maybe when YouTube changed their policy or on a different stream, we'll pull it up so we don't get completely nuked. Although they even say in their policies, if it is for a commentary or satire, then you're allowed to say that maybe essential oil is not destroying your health. Well, but you know how it goes with health information. Well, yeah, thank you for sticking up with me. I guess Andreas is already busy preparing for his theater or whatever he's going to do.
Oh, no
I'll
problem.
have
The pleasure was all mine. It was amazing. I had a great conversation. Like, honestly.
Me as well. I have to announce you are hosting, I guess today it will be 8 p.m.
Yes. 9 p.m. Eastern time.
8 p.m. at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Everyone subscribe to Exertus and join Terror Risk when he's gonna be hosting the 8 p.m. panel later tonight.
Yeah, thank you guys so for thanks for talking. Good night, everybody, or good evening, and see you tonight. Okay.